Hello guys, we are on the game 3 in the Blockades and Prophylaxis series, and this game is a French defense advanced variation. And here the players are: the white player is the rush and the black player is Tickman. And let's see the game: e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, bishop to g5, bishop e7, e5, knight ft7, bishop takes, queen takes, and then queen d2, and now castles, f4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, g3, a6, bishop g2, b5, castle shot, cd4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, then queen takes d4, now queen c5, now queen takes c5, knight takes c5, now knight to e2. We have a well-known pawn structure which often arises from the French defense. White is ready to install a blockading knight on d4 and organize a pawn attack on the king side. Black intends to carry out active play on the queen side using the semi-open c file. Due to fixed pawns on d5 and e6, it is good for him to exchange his bishop. On the other hand, white should aim for an endgame without rooks and with black's bad light squared bishop. The game is quite balanced and everything depends on players' strategic skills. Takeman was a fun player and sharp in middle games, full of combinatory and tactical play. In this position, however, it is no surprise the great Dr. Tarash outplayed him. Now bishop to d7. This is the first mistake by Takeman. The bishop does not belong there. Here a5 was much better, with the idea of b4 and bishop to a6, activating the bad bishop. Knight d4, rook a c8, king f2, rook c7, king e3. Now rook to e8. This is an unnecessary prophylaxis. White is nowhere near ready to play f5. Here h5 was a good choice. What is the point is, isn't it bad to set pawns on the bishop's color? But yes, it is. However, this is an exception. The point is that black should prevent white kingside expansion. Counterplay on the queen side is not very promising with the bishop on d7. So by playing h5 and later g6, black would be ready to exchange many pawns on the king side in case of white's expansion. It is often a good idea to exchange pawns in positions where the opponent has an advantage. The weak g5 and f6 squares, by the way, cannot be exploited by white. The point is that he needs his knight on d4. So here instead of rook to e8, h5 was better, and after rook to e8, now rook f2, knight to b7. This is interesting, not such a bad move, although it was unfortunately part of a bad plan. It was still good to put the pawns on h5 and g6. Now bishop to f1, now knight to a5. Now b3, now h6. Here rook c3 check also gives nothing. After king to d2, now rook back to c7, now rook to f3. There is the interesting and promising possibility for the white to use the third rank to exchange rooks. After exchanging rooks, black's weakened queen side will be in danger. And if at all after king d2 b4 is played, then a3 is good, and if at all rook e to c8, then b4, knight to b7, then a4, black's position collapses. But rook c3 was not played. Instead, black played h6. Uh, Here still h5 was a good option. Now bishop to d3, knight to c6. This is a key mistake. Black should leave the pieces to cover the weak dark squares on the queen side. White's knight on d4 is a monster, of course, but his king will be no less dangerous there. Now knight takes c6. After bishop takes c6, now king to d4. Immediately blocking the d5 pawn and eliminating the ideas involving d4. Now bishop to d7, now g4. It is time for aggression. Now bishop c8, h4, g6, rook h1, king g7, and h5, rook h8, rook f h2, then bishop d7, g5, hg5, fg5. Here h6 check, king to h7, fg5, and rook h2 c8, and then rook to f2, then bishop to e8 is much better for white, but no direct win is visible. After f2, fg5, and rook takes h5, rook takes h5, g takes h5, rook takes h5, king f8, rook h8 check, king e7, g6. This is an imprecise move. Do not rush. Here rook to h7, king to f8, and g6, and fg6, and bishop takes g6, and king to g8, rook to f7 was the correct path to victory. After g6 by white, then fg6, bishop takes g6, b4, rook h7 check, king d8, bishop to d3, rook to c3. Here rook c6 was correct, and it holds the position. Now rook h8 check, king e7, and black resigned here. White easily wins after a3. After a3 the game will go like rook c8. Now ab4 is coming, then rook to b8, rook to b6, then c3. So white is winning here. So here black resigned. So thank you all guys. I hope you would have enjoyed the game. I'll be meeting you in the next game.